Hey, what is going on, you guys? It is Nathan Harmon with Your Life Speaks, and I'm just honored to get an opportunity to live life with you on here. I always wish I was in person, but regardless, I hope that the moment that we get a chance just to kind of talk, that you guys are listening, that you can be inspired that no matter what your story is, no matter where you're currently at, young or old, that we were all born to do hard things, that we're better together, and that every single one of us have the building blocks of resiliency and grit and perseverance. But those building blocks of grit, resiliency, and perseverance are directly connected to the human connection. And that today in 2025, that one of the challenges that we have as people, especially a younger generation that's navigating and forming these what I call default settings, these life skills of how do we react to adversity and how do we react to pressure and how do we react to life, that many of our young adults are growing up in a time in world history that we as an older generation didn't have to because of technology, because of the social environment of social media and just how interconnected we are by the internet. And I always say I'm not against technology and social media. I know I won't say it's good or it's bad. I just know it's powerful. But what I do know is that we're in a time where many of us have to contend, fight, and lean into the fact that this can't replace this, the human connection. The reality that when you are in a room with friends or you're in a classroom or that you're in the workforce or that you're at home, that one of those powerful tools we have is our voice and communication, and that we're better together. We are not meant to do life on our own. We can't see our blind spots. And so, just as I share my heart with you and bring you guys kind of into my journey, into my story, I hope many of you are just inspired, but also can begin to connect some dots in some of your maybe your deficiencies or your shortcomings or your failures or some of your ways that you process things that aren't getting to the root but are kind of just masking it and band-aiding it and being a stone skipping across the top of the water. And that'll make more sense as we get into this. But my name is Nathan Harmon, and I have been privileged over the last 10 years to be in almost 1,600 different high schools and middle schools and colleges in different venues and live life. Schools in Tokyo, Guatemala, Zimbabwe, Brazil, Jordan, and all across this nation. And my biggest burden for all people whenever I interact with them is that people begin to understand that you and I, we were born to do hard things, but truthfully, we were born not to hide from the storms and the rains of life, but we were meant to dance in the rain. And that as we are growing up and as we are constantly evolving as people, that there are two principles that have allowed me to kind of overcome, that have allowed me to finally stop some of the destructive behaviors and mentalities that I had for so many years and begin to lean in and take control of what I can control. And what I've learned, these two things that kind of govern my life, and I can break it down a little bit more complex, but the two basic pillars that have allowed me to have 16 years of sobriety and 16 years of waging the thought patterns that my life has purpose and matter and my life has meaning when I navigated suicidal ideation and all these things. And those two pillars are that I have the ability to make the next right choice and to treat people the next right way. Because what we give away, it's what we get to keep. So let's get into this as we kind of hopefully give some insight and to give some tools, some thought patterns, and some words for you to wrestle with. Some things that I may tell you to write this down, because truthfully, I've just learned what you feed will grow and what you starve will die. I don't talk about situations when it comes to mental health and substance abuse and some of these difficult things that we as people are confronted with, and that sometimes we find ourselves in the middle of and in the thralls of. I don't talk about mental health and substance abuse and behavior modifications because degrees behind my name. I talk about them because I've lived them, I've walked them, I've navigated them. And I want to share just this picture with you to kind of bring you in to my journey. That one you see probably on your left, maybe your right, is me at 18 years old. And I'm struggling at this time with thoughts of wanting to end my life and substance abuse that consumed me, where I became an addict and an alcoholic, and my life was just spiraling out of control. I talk about this subject matter specifically from lived experiences, and education's powerful, and knowledge is powerful, and that the more that we learn the science of our brain and our life, of why we do, it's all working together. But hopefully right now you come on a journey with me and a little bit of a story, which is my story. And throughout that, I will punch in some disciplines and some thought patterns and some habits that I've learned that's allowed me the opportunity to confront, fight, and fail forward, and not just settle for the comfort of staying the same. I was raised growing up in Marion, Indiana, and I come from a family of four. And to be honest, growing up, I was probably pretty just naive, and I thought I had a picture perfect family. I had never saw my father fight and my mother fight in front of me. I thought I had like this picture perfect scenario. My parents never fought really in front of me, and I was never allowed in their bedroom as a kid growing up. The reason is that if you get to really know me, I got one speed, all gas, no brakes. I'm a squirrel. Let's go. And I was a kid, I broke a lot of things, and I probably created a lot of anxiety and family members and grandparents because I was just intense. And so my parents had kind of limited, their room was a place to kind of turn me off and kind of have some peace from the chaos of my high energy, high octane life when I was young. And that made sense in the natural. But I had never saw them fight. And we came from a very impoverished family. We didn't have a lot. And my mom and my dad did the best that they could. But to be honest, we didn't have hardly anything. But I wanted to play basketball when I was a kid. And I always start with this story because it kind of defines a lot of my life and a lot of the areas that I've learned to kind of take control of what I can control. But I wanted to hoop, and Indiana's a basketball state. And I didn't know when I grew up. You can't really tell that from here. But when I grew up, I only grew to be 5'7" ish. I would have picked a different sport. But I wanted to hoop. And so I remember one Christmas, my grandparents, they poured a piece of concrete for me. And my dad got a telephone pole and he stuck it in the ground. And he went and got some jankety backboard and rim. And I remember at 11 years old, I walked into a basketball court with my father, and my heart was just full of gratitude, and I was thankful. And we were getting ready to start hooping, and my dad's trying to teach me how to play, and I already kind of knew how to play, right? I had played ball before, but now I had a court at my own house, which was a really big deal because we had nothing. And I remember the very first time that I get the ball and I go to shoot it. And my dad, true story, he smacks the ball as I shoot it, and he laced it off my face, and it confused me. my dad was grown and I'm a kid. He's my father. I'm his son. And I pick up the ball again and I shoot it. And listen, for 2 hours, my dad beat the brakes off of me playing basketball. I didn't watch the silly ball go in the silly goal, not one time. And after 2 hours of my father demoralizing me, like I was leaking snot and leaking tears, and I was on meltdown mode. And I heard a voice from the back of my house, and it was my mom, and she came out and she just screamed the word, Tim, why wouldn't you let your son make one bucket? And still to this day, all these years later, I remember what my father said to me. I wasn't trying to hear it then, but what he said, as I look back, man, it's pretty profound in my heart. He looked at me and he said, listen, my son, it's not about him making goals on a basketball court. But in life, there will always be objects and obstacles keeping me from where I'm trying to go. And that I had to understand at a young age that I have the ability, no matter what my environment is, that I have the ability to identify a problem, recognize the problem, and learn how to get around the problem, and giving up won't be in my mouth. My father said, I'm not giving him a bucket. He has to learn that he can do hard things. He needs to know deep inside of him that he's not a product of the environment. He's a product where he finds the courage to do. And on that, the truth is that our environments, they factor into who we are. They play a part of our story. They're always going to be a part of where we currently sit and stand in life. But you're not defined by the environment. We never will be. We may believe the lie that we are. We may sometimes use the excuse of our past as a crutch so we don't have to look in the mirror and to confront, fight, and fail. And I can be that absolute with that and so specific because I came from that difficult environment. But he was always trying to get me to know that I'm not a product of my environment. I'm a product of what I find the courage to do. He had a quote that he used to say to me when I was young that I didn't care about too much then, but he used to always tell me, Nathan, never forget, as long as there's breath in my lungs, there's hope in my heart. As long as you're breathing, yes, you can. And I wasn't trying to hear the philosophical father in my life as a kid. Like I was just trying to hoop, but my dad was always trying to speak life and inspire me just to know that I was born to do hard things. But life comes wave after wave. And one of the challenges we have as people is navigating what I call creative control, is that we don't always have creative control of our circumstances. We don't always have creative control of the environment. Sometimes as young people specifically, we just have to deal with things that home life is bringing us or our community has kind of brought us. Things sometimes because we're young and we're still young adults, sometimes things we have to deal with that we didn't ask for and we didn't sign up for, but life brings us adversity and we just have to deal. But no matter how young or old we are, that's the challenge that we have throughout our story of life, is that how do we learn to manage the creative control that we do have? And how do we not allow the things that we don't have creative control specifically over to not live rent-free in our head, or not to consume our mind where we get stuck on repeat, replay, rewash, recycle. Life brings us what I call moments of impact. There are moments of impact in our lives when things happen that we didn't, we experienced, and sometimes they're a good experience. Maybe it was a championship that you won playing sports as a student or as a young adult, or maybe it was a vacation that you went on and it was the first time your toes ever touched the sand, or maybe it's when you've gotten older and you've had families. But we've all got these positive moments of impact that bring joy and purpose and excitement. It was a good experience in that when you actually pause and reflect, those details about that thing, whatever that thing was, man, they're just good memories. But also in moments of impact, they can come through hardships and adversity and challenges. Maybe it's when you've experienced a family divorce, or you experienced a loss, or maybe you went through some kind of abuse, or just some difficult, painful moment that, just like the positive on the negative, when you experience that loss or that hurt, even though it was 2 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever it was, that thing, the details are just more vivid. I call them moments of impact. And most of us listening to me could pause and reflect, and we could realize that we've got these highlights in our past that are just more vivid. For me, right after the basketball conversation with my dad, one of those moments of impact happened to me. Like I said at the beginning, I never really saw my mom and my dad fight. I thought I had a picture perfect family. And my parents always used to use family meetings to try kind of bring us good experiences. Whenever we would find some money for some clothes for the school year, or maybe a little vacation, they would call a family meeting so my sister and I could appreciate the moment. My parents called a family meeting, and I was 11 years old. And I remember when I walk into that kitchen, every detail: my dad to my right, my mom across from me, my sister to the left, my back to the sink, to the stove, and to the fridge. And I remember what my father began to say to me. And he said, "Nikki, Nathan, we need to talk to you. Things aren't what they seem." And he began to talk about how that my mom and him were kind of at their ends, and they couldn't work it out any longer, and they were going to be separating, and he was going to move out. And it rocked me because I had never perceived that. And again, maybe I was just young and naive, but I never saw them fight. And next thing you know, my father, within a few weeks, he moves up and he moves out and he's gone. And I didn't ask for it, and I didn't ask for it, and I didn't sign up for it. Sorry, but now I have to deal with it. And that's one of the challenges I think we as people have to deal with, right? Is these areas that we don't have creative control, and how do we continue to step into our story and to not let pressure bust pipes, but let pressure make diamonds. And the reason why pressure in your life and my life, it doesn't have to bust pipes, but it can make things of crazy worth and value. It's because, truthfully, every single one of us listening to my voice, science proves you are rare, scarce, and unique. That there's no other you. And how I can say science proves it, it's because of your fingertips and your fingerprints. That these fingertips and these fingerprints on the ends of our hands, these grooves and these little ridges and these patterns, even though there's 8 billion people in the planet, these fingertips and these fingerprints are a unique identifier of me. That anything that I touch, or any hand that I shake, or anywhere that I go, that these fingertips and these fingerprints, they can always be traced and tracked back to me. I'm a 1 of 8 billion. These fingertips are so unique that if you ever had found yourself arrested, and that I hope none of you ever have, but in my journey I did when I was 18, 20, and 23, that these fingertips and these fingerprints, they get put on file, right? And they're so unique that it's a unique identifier. It can be traced and tracked back to me. The truth is that you are rare, scarce, and unique, just like me. And we put value on things that are rare and scarce, like jewelry or exotic cars. And the reason why, when you and I find the courage to step into our story, pressure doesn't have to bust pipes, but pressure can make diamonds, because we're made of that same kind of thing that creates crazy worth and value when we're willing to lean into our story and understand, like, being comfortable isn't where I grow, but really learning to be uncomfortable, learning to confront, fight, and fail forward. That's been my journey. But I didn't learn it overnight and it didn't come easily. This has been a journey of progress over perfection. It's 5 steps forward and 3 steps back. You know, for me, when my father walked out of my story at 11 years old, um, I didn't close the bedroom door like he did, dealing with issues and hurts and pains and questions. I learned to put on the fake face. I learned in that moment to keep everybody at an arm's reach distance. I didn't trust people, and I had a valid reason not to. I felt if my dad could walk out of my story, why and how could I ever trust other people? Because if my father could abandon me, how could I ever trust you? And that really was a lie and a thought pattern that I began to allow to take a deep root in my heart throughout my story from 11 on. See, I always say resiliency, grit, and perseverance, it's part of who we are. We were born to do hard things, but it's ignited and it's activated in the human connection, being vulnerable and transparent and meaningful relationships and friendships, peer to peer, those people that are in the same space and kind of demographic that I'm at, that we're growing up together. We rock the same music, we listen to the same things, like we have those friends on that peer to peer level, that at the end of the day, the human connection with those people, but also mentors and coaches and people that can speak into my life, that my friends can't always help me because they haven't been in certain areas and places. And that's why having the coach, the mentor, that person in our life, that's why therapists and counselors and psychologists, they ask us lots of questions whenever we're kind of navigating in that space. Why? Not because they're going to solve our world problems. Yes, they can give us great strategies and good advice. But truthfully, what I've learned in my story is that people ask questions, and I ask questions because when you and I start to talk, when we start to communicate, that's when something inside of us gets activated. I truly know in my heart, which is resiliency and grit and perseverance. When I begin to understand that, like my father told me at a young age, that I have the ability to identify the problem and recognize the problem, talking does just that. It begins to activate the greatest computer, I think, on the earth. You and me, our mind, our heart, our thought pattern, our resiliency. When we begin to actually communicate and to talk, we're beginning to say, hey, there's an area that I'm highlighting that I want to begin to lean into, that I want to begin to unpack. Because truthfully, resiliency and grit's directly connected to the human connection and the conversations. The problem was for me, though, is that I struggled with the courage to let people in. I struggle with the word trust, because trusting people demands some layer and some level of vulnerability and transparency. And let's be honest, I didn't trust people. And second, the difficulty of trusting people is when I begin to share my heart and I begin to let people know whatever I'm dealing with, I can't control what they are going to then do with it. And so there's this fear of this unknown. If I'm not careful, it will just hold me and paralyze me, where I'm not letting anyone in. And slowly the pressure begins to build. And as pressure builds, pressure can bust pipes. The number one way we're meant to release pressure on a mental and emotional level, it's by talking. It's by communicating. There's other healthy disciplines and habits that I'll get into later. But the number one thing is that, truthfully, conversations matter. But I got caught in this crazy world from middle school when my parents got divorced. As I began to navigate through my story, I was able to, throughout middle school, maintain. I could tread water. I could put on the fake face and walk the walk and talk the talk. But eventually the pressure just became too much. And as the pressure began to build and I wouldn't talk because I didn't trust, it began to surface in coping strategies that would never get to the root. I was like a stone skipping across the top of the water, and I never knew the depth of who I truly was and what I actually could step into and overcome, and to know that I could do hard things. You know, I used to think growing up that I will trust people when I feel like I can. One of my factors or my like evidences that I was looking for to see who I could be vulnerable and trust was when I feel like I can. The problem is feelings, and hear me, feelings aren't always based in facts. Feelings aren't always final. And what I mean by that, feelings are always valid. They're always yours. They're always valuable. I'm never going to dismiss anyone's feelings, but feelings aren't always based in the fact of the situation. And here's what I mean. I had low self-esteem. I had low self-worth. I was a heavier kid when I was going through middle school. And I remember that if I walked by you and you two happened to be talking and I made eye contact with you, because of my lack of self-worth and low self-esteem, I just knew that I knew in my heart that you had to be talking about me, and how it felt was real and it was authentic and it was valid. They were my feelings. But when I went and confronted that person or had a conversation with that person and I realized they weren't talking about me at all, I've had to understand that just because I feel a certain type of way, my feeling isn't always based in the reality. So I can allow my feelings to be the primary reason or the primary signal of who I begin to trust. Because let's be real, my father abandoned my journey when I was young. It left a really negative moment of impact in my life. It was going to be very difficult for me to interact with somebody and instantly have a feeling that I can trust them. I was operating from a past wound and a hurt. I was walking wounded. And so, what I've had to learn is trusting people isn't based on feelings, it's based on time. And that's not to diminish our feelings. That's not a great tool. Like, there's times when I feel like, hey, I shouldn't walk down that alley tonight, or maybe I shouldn't go here. And like, you get those moments, those intuitions. Like, I'm not diminishing some of those fight or flight feelings. But what I'm saying, when it comes to trusting people, which is so important because trust is required to have meaningful connections and community, trust is needed to be vulnerable and transparent, which are two huge pillars in my life. Trusting people isn't something that primarily should be factored on a feeling. To me, it's factored on time. That mentor, that coach, that friend that has been consistent and persistent in our lives, that they don't always tell you what you want to hear, but they tell you what you need to hear. They're that friend that isn't afraid to speak up and to speak out. And to be honest, I've had to be intentional of beginning to let those people that we all have in our lives. And I know sometimes somebody will say, like, I just don't have anyone. The truth is that normally and very rarely, maybe like 0.001, and I've been in front of almost 2 million young adults and adults throughout my life, communicating on different stages and different places. We've all got probably one person. Very rarely does somebody have absolutely no one. And even that person probably has a counselor, a teacher, a coach, a mentor, somebody in the community that would love to see them win, and they mean it. I've learned that trusting people is based on time, and that sometimes I just actually have to do it afraid. I've got to punch the fear of my feeling in its mouth. And that's not me promoting any kind of violence, but feelings aren't final. And I've had to learn sometimes that the most important tool of learning to have good community and communication and conversations and peer groups and your tribe of people is that you've got to learn to trust. And that trust isn't based on a feeling. It's based off those people around you that you know they want to see you win. See, I didn't know that. So slowly throughout middle school, and as I transitioned from middle school to high school, my freshman year, I was a straight A student still. I was treading water. I was doing enough. I was making it. Even though I was struggling, I was screaming, but I was silent. I put on the fake face really well. But my freshman year, it's when it became too much. I was actually voted going to be one of the most successful freshmen in my class. Uh, I was a straight A student. I was truly trying to prove to my father that I didn't need him. To be honest, my driving motive wasn't the greatest. I was so focused not to become like my father. To be honest, over time, I was so focused not to become like him. And my anger and my bitterness and my frustration, the very thing that I was so focused not to become like, I was so focused looking in the rear view mirror, not looking at the windshield of everything in front of me. I found myself walking into some similar footpaths of my family, of my father. You know, my freshman year, it's when I began to struggle with my mental health. I began to isolate more and more, and I felt like I didn't matter. I didn't belong. Nobody was going to love me. Nobody sees me. Anxiety was playing just wild stories in my head, right? Like I always say, anxiety gets birthed in the what if, and what if, and what if, and we begin to build scenarios and stories in our mind and of some event or some experience um or something that we're about to have to navigate or go through, or their fear of rejection, all of these things, and we build these stories. And I always say depression and anxiety, a lot of it can be birthed in the what if space. And absolutely there's clinical depression and chemical imbalances and all of these things that factor in. But as I've stood in front of millions of young people, most of us that are dealing with some of these negative emotional kind of thought patterns and struggles and feelings, it's not always because of the chemical deficiencies, but a lot of times it's the fears of not being vulnerable and not being real, and not wanting to let people in, and we're running stories and scenarios. And so as the pressure builds, sometimes we begin to create outlets that never get to the root. Like I dealt with self-injury and self-harm. I remember my freshman going into my sophomore year, one of the outlets, it was I didn't know how to control the internal, and I wouldn't talk. So it began to come out in physical pain, and it became to come out in my behavior of hurting people, or, I remember that when I dealt with some for the time of self-injury, like the physical pain, it would alleviate it. It would mask the internal pain for a moment, but I would wake up just as empty as I did the day before. It never got to the root. And that is the same thing with my behavior. And sometimes it would come out with stepping on people. I always say hurting people hurt people. And so I begin to step on people, and I begin to try to make fun of people. And I remember I began to try to take my worth and take my value. And the truth is that you can't take your worth and you can't take your value. Hurting people hurt people. And I remember there was times that I would just get angry at somebody. And maybe you listening, there's been times in your life that you've gotten angry or frustrated, or you got into a fight, and in the moment, right? Like in that intensity of the moment, it feels kind of good, and it's kind of masking and band-aided the internal pain. But slowly, after the outburst or the interaction, when you go back and you begin to process, or you're going through some of the discipline, or maybe just when you are laying your neck down to go to bed, those same pains, insecurities, deficiencies, they're still right there knocking in our heart. See, you can't take your worth and you can't take your value. Hurting people hurt people. And I was in that place that I had over many of years developed patterns that didn't get to the root. I would just mask it and band-aid it. I was a stone skipping across the top of the water. Ultimately, my sophomore year, some friends that I had begin to develop, and I say friends, but they were really just people, because I, again, was always trying to find my purpose, my place, where I fit in. We've all got an authentic us. And that authentic us, even though it doesn't always come to the surface. But I'm talking about that you, that when you find the moment just to pause your life, and I know we live in a very fast paced life, but when we do find the moment to pause, there's this authentic you that we all want to feel like we matter, we belong, we have purpose. The challenge is that when we step outside and we get around others, or we begin to interact in the community or the environment, that authentic you of purpose and goals and dreams and that hunger to want to be successful and to feel like your life had meaning, we've all got it. Even though sometimes some of you may be watching this, you've found yourself in some destructive patterns, and you found yourself where others have kind of already labeled you, or you've already labeled yourself. Sometimes we build layers over ourselves where we act like, I don't really care about what others think, and I don't really care about my dreams or my futures, or we just but the truth is when you begin to peel back those layers and you pause, I just believe with everything, and all the belief that I have in this is from the real life interaction with millions of people, that at the core of all of us, there's this glimmer, this spark that we want to feel like our life has meaning. But when we try to navigate that, and we're operating from some of our negative thought patterns, right? And we're navigating from some of our ways that we confront things, we sometimes, that authentic you and the public you is not the same person. What will they think? We live through everybody else's highlight reels. We don't want to let people in because we don't know what they will do with it. And so sometimes that authentic you gets suppressed. And if you're not careful, it can find its way out in destructive ways, because pressure, it's going to come out. It can bust pipes or it can make diamonds. You and I have the creative control. We were born to do hard things. I go back to my dad's quote when I was a kid. Life isn't hiding from the storm. It's learning to dance in the rain. But I had developed a lot of negative thought patterns. My sophomore year, it's when I began to compromise, and I got involved with substances, and I started drinking, and I started hanging around with the wrong crowds that I thought were going to give me the image that I wanted. And they started inviting me to try this, and the peer pressure. And to be honest, like peer pressure and that environment of substance abuse, the danger for many of it is yes, I could give you the science and the statistics, and I could give you the education of what comes to, the dangers of substance abuse and the chemical dependencies that are in some of these certain drugs. And I've lost my niece to an overdose, and families, and I've been there. That picture right here, right? Like when I show people this picture, like I don't talk from just head knowledge. That picture that you see there, that I look like I'm a dead man walking, to be honest, that was me at 18 years old when I began as a sophomore to, what I say, feed the bear. Like the bear cub, it's cute and it's cuddly when it's a baby bear cub, right? Bear cubs are super like adorable, and I always say that you could give me the toughest, most strong-willed person, but if I put you in front of a baby brand new bear cub, like every one of us will just smell like, it's cute. The problem is when you begin to feed the bear cub and the bear cub grows up, and it's not a cute cuddly bear cub anymore, it's a full-blown grizzly. Like you have to keep feeding it, because if you don't, it will destroy you. And so that addiction, it kind of crept in the same way with me. Like the one biggest pitfall for me when I began to find myself compromising and giving into the peer pressure of substance abuse was that I was walking wounded. I had deeper hurts and deeper pains that I hadn't dealt with. And just like my behavior of hurting people, they're just like just like self-injury or self-harm, like it would mask it for the moment, but I would wake up just as empty as I did the day before. Substance abuse adds this extra layer of danger, because a lot of times when you begin to give into peer pressure, there's a community. And so when I say like we're better together, we need community, the importance of the human connection. That a lot of times though, when you find people that are sharing habits of smoking and drinking and partying and using substances that to kind of mask our hurts and our pains, even though that maybe wasn't our intention. Maybe you were just experimenting, but eventually it begins to do the masking of the hurts and the pain in your mind. You're like, this is a quick fix. It won't get to the root, but it also feeds into this idea of a counterfeit connection. That I had a group of people that I would call friends at the time, but they weren't real friends. We weren't sharing deep, hurtful, challenging stories of adversity, and we weren't trying to encourage each other to be the best version of ourselves. Like, we were just sharing the habits, and we were just sharing the struggles. Like, they were a sense of community and a connection, but it was counterfeit. It was a mask and it was a band-aid, and I would wake up just as empty as I did the day before. And this became one of the real challenges that I had, that I were developing, and I did develop coping strategies that never got to the root. And so slowly over time, my life continued to spiral out of control. To be honest, I didn't graduate. I went from straight A's to straight F's, and I got expelled my senior year. I skipped school more times than probably possible. And I was just struggling with my mental health and my behavior and my substance abuse, which became one of my go-tos. Like, I never thought when I began to compromise myself that I would become an alcoholic or an addict. I never thought that when I began to step into that space that it would begin to paralyze me on my mindset, and it would begin to fog up my decisions, where I would start to make choices that wasn't normally who I was. I remember I started stealing from people, and I was actually kicked out of my mom's house because I couldn't be like, it was devastating, and hopelessness and all of these things. Ultimately, in my story, to bring you on to this journey with me, is that at 23 years old, when I should have been a senior graduating college, I was still just living in my hometown and going through the motions, and kind of, maybe I'm the only one, but there had been many of times in my life, right, that when I had a real moment or a real thought of, I want to change my direction, or I want better for my life, right, that authentic voice would surface when I was by myself, and I wanted to stop using drugs, or I wanted to begin to navigate and find better outlets for my mental health, or maybe it was even something like procrastinating with my homework, or finding better ways to treat people, and to try to be more kind. Like, we've all got moments. I know that when that authentic you surfaces, there are times when you're like, man, I should change. I want to change. I need to change, but nothing ever changes. Why? Because change is uncomfortable. And none of us wake up and say, today, I want to be uncomfortable. A lot of times we slide and we glide and we go back to where we've been, and then we'll lie to ourselves and we'll say, like, this is where we want to be. I'm cool. It is what it is, but it's not where we want to be. It's just what we know. And we became comfortable. And so we're willing, because of the comfort of it being what we know, and the fear of change, and the fear of failure, and the fear of vulnerability, and the fear of transparency, and the fear of learning to look in the mirror and taking ownership and saying that it's time to confront, fight, and fail forward. And what I mean by fail forward is that, man, it's progress over perfection. It's 5 steps forward and 3 steps back. It's every single day knowing that at the end of the day, if I can wake up and look in the mirror and say, I'm giving today the best of my ability on these 2 areas, can I today give maximum effort of making the next right choice, and also learning the best of my ability to add value, to treat people the next right way? That's my definition of falling forward. But it's difficult, right? Because that demands you and I to confront ourselves, and to confront fear, and to step into our story, and to know that we were born to do hard things. And to be honest, sometimes you just got to find the courage to do it afraid. And as I look back in my life, I've learned these through experiences and mentors, and I've learned these through just so many different situations that I've had to kind of wrestle through. And to be honest, I didn't figure this all out because I just had an epiphany. My life, my journey was one of me not taking control of what I can control, but also sometimes that I was making choices that were self-inflicting, making decisions that would also hurt other people, because substance abuse and some of those different areas that I've been talking about, it affects the people around you, and on all different scales. And for me, from 18 to 23, I remember I was living in my hometown and going nowhere fast. And at 23 years old, when I should have been a senior graduating college, I was still just kind of going through the motions, struggling. And all of my friends came home from college and they said, "Hey, Nathan, we're going to go to a party. Do you want to come?" And I said, "Yeah, for sure. It's what we do." I was legal age to drink. I was 23. And so I went to the party. And when that party ended, we went to the bar and I was legal age to drink. And they said, "Hey, Nathan, we're going to go to, when the bar closes down, we're going to go to an after party at TJ's house. Do you want to come?" And I remember at that time I had too much to drink. And again, my life had just spiraled into chaos. And I said, "Yeah, let's go to TJ. That's my guy. It's my friend. And I know him real well. And I had the keys to his house." And so I said, "I'll leave a little bit early and I'll go get the party ready and everybody can come and come after when the bar closes." But I was too drunk to drive. So I got on the phone and I called my friend Priscilla. And I called my friend Priscilla and I said, "Hey, Priscilla, can you come get me?" Priscilla had moved from Alabama. She was a friend of our community. And for the few months that she moved from Alabama, and she wasn't there that night and I needed a ride. And I said, "Hey, Priscilla, can you come get me?" And she said, "Nate, I'll be right there." And she shows up. And when we left the bar on that July 17th, 2009, when I was 23, I'm 40 now. I'm an old head these days, y'all. And when I left the bar on that July 17th, 2009, somewhere in the process, I got the keys. And when I talk about moments of impact, moments when the details are just more vivid, and it could be a good or a bad thing, I was right around the corner from TJ's house. And what my friend Priscilla said to me, it echoes and it rings. And she screamed one word, and it was the word tree. And then I was in a helicopter and I woke up in a hospital bed. The police over top of me asking me questions. What's her name? And who is she? Her ID wasn't in her wallet and her cell phone was locked, and she was fighting for her life. And I remember I wake up and I say her name's, it's Priscilla Owens. What's going on? And they said, "Well, Mr. Harmon, we can't really tell you anything. You're not family." And my mama had showed up at the hospital room that morning. She had gotten word from my sister, who was a nurse, that relayed information to my mother. And she shows up and, I said, "Her name's Priscilla Owens. What's going on?" And they said, "Well, again, you're not family. She's alive, but there's a lot of trauma." And for some reason that morning, they didn't arrest me right then and there. I'm pretty sure they were still trying to figure out what kind of a crime, a DUI or a DUI with bodily injury. And they said, "Mr. Harmon, we'll be in contact with you soon." And on the ride home, my mom began to let me know that my life was going to forever change. I was a 23-year-old kid. And she began to say, "You had to treat a high rate of speed." And there was no brake marks, no skid marks, 60 to 63, boom. And upon impact, you made collision with the steering wheel and it knocked you unconscious, but you had your seatbelt on. But Priscilla didn't. And upon impact, she launched forward and she made impact with the windshield. And there's a lot of trauma. Your life's about to change, Nathan. And to be honest, I remember when I was in high school, they'd bring speakers and communicators in. And to be honest, we go through one ear and out the other at sometimes, most of the times. Like that happens to other people, but not people like you and me. And here I am now at 23 years old, and I'm face to face with this reality. And I got home and I called the police in the hospital. And Nobody would tell me anything. I wasn't family, but the newspaper that morning of my accident said two lifeline to Parkview, Indiana, one fighting for their life. And so I remember I decided I was going to stay up the entire night and make every deal with myself. And I asked, just let her live and I will change my life. And I remember the paper delivery guy came and I could see the white of his eyes, and I jumped up and I ripped it open, and it was 2:47 in the morning, and the paper had said three words, and it had said crash victim had passed away. And that picture you're seeing right now, it's my friend Priscilla. I always say if I could change anything, of course, a million times over, I'd go back to July 17, 2009. To be honest, if I could change anything, I would rewind it even farther back because it would have stopped that moment too. I would have rewound it back to when I was a high school student or a junior high student. And if I would have realized that truthfully, one of the most important things of being a young adult, it's the reality of this word that I've said a few times, but it's true. It's the reality of creative control. That in life, there's a lot of things that we as people, we don't have creative control over, things that we just have to deal with and navigate. But there are also areas in our stories that we do have creative control. And what I've learned about being a young adult, that school is so much more today in 2025 than just getting on to the next grade and graduating and going to college. Education is power, and it will open up doors. It will create new avenues and outlets for so many of us. It's true. But truthfully, school today for young adults, when you go to that school, when you go to that community, it's the one place that you actually can have complete creative control. You don't always have creative control at home life, right? One of the difficulties that we can have is that we're a people that absorb. That's why sometimes we finish each other's sentences and we dress similar because we absorb from each other. We're like sponges. And what's hard sometimes is that we don't always have the creative control of home life. And so sometimes that's bad, but sometimes it can be good, right? Mom and dad can be thriving and trying to inspire and creating you real mental and emotional habits and disciplines of choices and the ripple effect and trying their best to help you win. Sometimes it's not good. And you've got to be able to not allow the negative always to bleed into who you are. And how do you minimize some of the negative environment, but begin to create the atmosphere that's why I love school, is that you can decide the friend groups and you can decide kind of who you want to be and the courage. Like school is the one place that you have complete creative control. And it's not just about education anymore, if you ask me. It's also the place where the social and emotional, the life skills that you watching this were born to do hard things, and that your life, it is a story, and you're the author, and you're the producer, and you're the sound engineer, and you're the script writer. Your life, it speaks, it screams, and it shouts. And when we find the courage to lean into our story and to confront, fight, and fail, for me and my story, it's just part of it. Her family, 3 days after my accident, they wanted me to reach out to them and contact them. And I had never met Priscilla's mom and her sister before. And now they're wanting me as a 23-year-old kid to call them. And I was, to be honest, terrified. What do you say? I'm sorry. And I pick up the phone and I remember I call and they answer and they say, Nathan, we don't know you. We've never met you. But we don't think one dumb choice should destroy two families' lives. And we want you to know that we've decided to pick love over hate. And we want you to know that we forgive you. And we don't even know what that means, but we're asking you to do one thing, and that's not let our daughter Priscilla die for nothing, and try to make the world a better place. And of course I said yes, but choices have consequences. And just because the family forgave me, the state of Indiana didn't. And so at 23 years old, I was charged and I was sentenced at that time to 15 years in prison for reckless homicide. My out date was May of 2024. And to be honest, as a 23-year-old kid, it would have been easy to quit. My father abandoned me when I was young. I went through a lot of verbal, mental, and some abuse when I was younger, battling suicidal ideation, self-injury, self-harm, eating disorders, of bulimia when I was younger because I wanted to look a certain type of way. All of these coping strategies that was trying to get to the root, but I never could because I wouldn't talk, hurting people, popping pills and drinking and the substance abuse and the alcohol that would mask and band-aid but never get to the root. I was the stone skipping across the top of the water. But at 23 years old, the Owens family asked me to try to change the world and make a difference. And I decided it was time for me to confront, fight, and fail. And I remember the quote that my father taught me when I was a kid. And he used to say, remember, as long as there's breath in my lungs, right? There's hope in my heart. As long as I'm breathing, yes, you can. You're never a product of the environment. You're a product of what you find the courage to do. And so at 23 years old, I wrote the words, change the world. And bah, I slapped it and I put it on the mirror in front of me in that cell. And I realized that I didn't know change the world meant that I would find myself becoming skilled at being a communicator, and I would have some ability and talents to speak and to articulate and to communicate, to challenge people to lean in and to actually lean into their authentic self, to maybe find the courage to confront, fight, and fail, and to know that we were born to do hard things. I didn't know when I put change the world on the mirror that as that would work itself out, that I would get released 11 and a half years from prison. I didn't know when I put change the world on the mirror that the governor would write a letter. And the reason I got released 11 and a half years early was because at that moment I was in prison, but I had been given opportunities when I found the courage to start to confront, fight, and fail and lean into my story, that I was getting chances to leave the prison in street clothes and go speak to different universities about choices and life and substances and all of these environments. And that the governor wrote a letter and said I was more effective in the community than I was in prison. See, when I put change the world on the mirror, I didn't have it specifically, vividly detailed out. It was like 500-foot faith. I knew the direction. And I think for some of us, one of the goals for you is that you've got to begin to know your why. See, when you begin to find your why, no storm can move you. One of the challenges and why I think mental health and substance abuse and some of these negative thought patterns are roaring in our mind is because what we feed will grow and what we starve will die. And too often we're willing to live through everybody else's highlight reel, and we're willing to just sit back and we're afraid to have any goals and dreams and really challenge ourselves. See, what I feed will grow and what I starve will die. And I didn't need to have it specifically. And your dreams and goals can change week after month after year. But you've got to have something that you're moving towards, that you have creative control over. You know, for me, when I put change the world in the mirror, it started simply like this. Let me make choices today that brings my dreams one step closer and not push it one step farther away. Literally, I had no creative control when the lights would go on and the lights would go off, when the food would come and the food would leave, when the door would open and the door would close. But you know what I did have creative control over? I could make my bed every single day. And for some, that sounds silly and elementary and simple. But I've just learned that if I can pause and look at my environment, my surroundings, and it's different for all of us, right? At that time, my environment, I was in prison. Where did I have creative control? Making my bed. Where did I not have creative control? All these. I can't allow those things to live rent-free and to consume me. Focus on what I can change. And so every single day I made my bed. And I've just learned that when you begin to develop the habit in your heart of taking control of what you can control, what you do and how you treat, what you say, and what you put your time and your focus into, because what you feed will grow and what you starve will die. And so for me, I start making my bed. And then as I begin to create habits of creative control, of me actually confronting, fighting, and failing forward, I then signed up for some college classes of psychology because I love the way the mind works. So now I have a choice to do work, to grow in knowledge and understanding and to navigate tasks and to execute when it comes to things that's needed of me and that truly is showing responsibility and growth? Or do I go out there and just rip and run in the rec yard? See, everyday life is about a bunch of choices. And how do I simplify my life and slow down and make choices that bring things that I'm passionate about, goals and dreams, one step closer and not push it farther away? All of you that drive in the passenger side view mirror, it says objects in the mirror are closer than things appear. And I've just learned every single day, how can I be consistent and persistent and bring that thing one step closer and not put it one step farther away? And so I live my life with 5 habits of my heart and my mind: transparency, accountability, hard work, good choices, and valuing people. If you're a note taker, you should take those notes down. I call them the five habits of my heart and my mind: transparency, accountability, hard work, good choices, and valuing people. You can simplify it though, even two, make the next right choice and treat people the next right way. What I give away, it's what I get to keep. And I've been over the last 16 years, and it's not been perfect. It's been this right here. It's been this reality that at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, it's progress over perfection. That at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, how do I continue each and every day to make choices, to know what I feed, what I put my time, focus, and energy into, it'll grow. And what I starve will die. How do I begin to realize that your story and your struggle, it's not a weapon to be used against you, but it's something that you can leverage for you? But you need people. Yes, you need the horizontal eye to eye friend, that person that can speak into your life, that you're growing up with, that they know you, the same age group. You've given them permission. You know, that's something that we struggle with. You sometimes, most of the times, all of the times, you need to give those people in your space permission to hold you accountable. I thought accountability growing up was somebody trying to get me caught up, taught up, told up, and in trouble. But accountability, really, it's an anchor. Those people in your life that can hold you, they can't make you be better. They really can't make you be worse. They're there consistently, persistently holding you. Those are those horizontal relationships, but you also need the vertical, the mentor, the coach, those people that have been in areas that you've already never yet been to, but maybe there's a struggle being presented in front of you, something that you didn't ask for, you didn't sign up for, but now you got to deal with. Your friends, they can't always help you because they haven't maybe navigated through that either. We're all kind of walking blinded in that spot. But that's why the vertical relationships of the mentors, the coaches, you know, for me, I began living my life that way. And one of the other areas that allowed me to know that I was born to do hard things was the fact that I realized that this family forgave me for the loss of their daughter. The most difficult thing that I believe is probably possible. I didn't deserve it, but man, I'm grateful. But it showed me that if a family could find the courage to do the most difficult thing that I think humanly possible, that I realized that there was a lot of people in my life that I was allowing to live rent free in my head that I wouldn't forgive and I wouldn't let go, because I thought if I forgave people, it would be me waving the white flag, justifying what they did to me. So I would harbor it and it would fester in my mind, in my heart, and it would live rent free. And I would go back to repeat, rewash, recycle, repeat, rewash, recycle. And if I wasn't careful, some of those negative experiences and those negative moments, I was so focused not to become like them, like my father abandoning me and his addiction. What you feed will grow and what you starve will die. I remember when I had to forgive my father, and I had to forgive him with no strings attached. I couldn't forgive him and say, you know what, he's going to come to the end of himself and make it all better. I wasn't forgiving him for him. I was forgiving him so I could start focusing on the windshield and not the rear view mirror. I got released 11 and a half years early because I'm not a product of my environment. You're a product of what you find the courage to do. And it doesn't always turn out the perfect way. But what I do know is there's never a wrong time to do what's right. We're better together. Hard work works. Make good choices, good things happen. There's a ripple effect in all of our lives. And truthfully, you and I have creative control to decide what kind of ripple we're leaving, one of impact, of purpose and meaning, or one of hurts and negativity. I always say in my five: transparency, accountability, hard work, good choices, and valuing people. The valuing people is not because it's last on my list. It's the last thing I want to talk to you about, because I've learned what I give away, it's what I get to keep. Random acts of kindness has been one of the greatest building blocks to me overcoming a lot of my destructive mentalities. Why? Because what I give away, it's what I get to keep. I used to want to fight. I used to try to take my worth and my value and make it about me. I used to use my past as a crutch. And at the end of the day, it never gave me real self-esteem, self-worth, even when I tried to prove to people that I was important. But when I started adding value and walking into classrooms or into work environments or community projects or sports clubs or student body, when I began to add value and I actually began to this to try to listen to other people's stories and encourage them, when my words, because there's life, real knows real, words are powerful, and we can build or we can destroy. And when we choose to build and we try to inspire and listen and encourage, you see other people's eyes light up. And what I couldn't get by trying to take my worth and take my value by behavior issues or substance abuse or all of these other destructive mentalities, I would always find myself right back where I was, walking wounded. But when I began to add value and help, when I would leave that experience, I knew from my experience, my actual encounter, that my life just helped somebody. And it began to subconsciously give me real self-esteem, real self-worth, and real self-value. What you give away, it's what you get to keep. And I know what time we're right here, probably at that moment. I'm a few minutes, probably even over the hour. But it's important for you to know, when I came home in 2012, I met, after 3.5 years of being incarcerated, I got met in my community by everybody saying, Nathan, you're an idiot. You're never going to change. You're always going to be what you've always been. And I didn't get offended. They had the right to feel that way. I just decided in that moment that my story wasn't going to be used against me, but that I'm the author of my story. And my story is a weapon for me. I'm not a product of my environment. That my life, it speaks, it screams, and it shouts. And so I live my life this way now, guys. The power of the human connection. I'm 16 years sober. Transparency, accountability, hard work, good choices, and valuing people. But of all of that, the way that I could hopefully inspire you is just to know this: that the human connection is the most powerful tool that we have. It's the building block to resiliency, grit, and perseverance. It's the building block to so many areas of our life skills that we are learning from the moment we're born to all the way until we take our last breath. None of us have ever arrived. We're all beautifully broken some way, somehow. I've just learned that I'm going to continue to confront, fight, and fail forward. I took Change the World off the mirror. I put it on my first house. When I got married and had my children, I want to show you this picture just because it's my people and I love these people so much. I don't have the picture of them. Never mind. I just want you to know that changed the world. I keep it in front of me everywhere I go. I don't know what your why is. I don't know what lights you up, but man, what you feed will grow and what you starve will die. We're better together. Keep using your community. Do it afraid. There's never a wrong time to do what's right. And if you happen to find yourself in a place, in a pattern, in a cycle, the way to stop is, man, let some people in. And I know that's difficult, because what will they do? What will they say? I can't control what they're going to do. Don't let that fear hold you hostage. We're better together, man. I've been there. I love you all. Listen, your life, it speaks, it screams, it shouts. Continue to own your story. Continue to know the most important tool we have is each other, and that our ability to identify the problem and solve the problem. It's in of us, all of us. We were born to do hard things. My name is Nathan Harmon. You can follow us on a lot of different socials and a lot of different medias. Um, and I just hope that all of you continue to own your story. You can find all of our stuff at Nathan Harmon or Your Life Speaks. But it's an honor. Continue today, guys, to know that you were born to do hard things. I love you all, and I hope that this is just some time that some things that I said really resonated in your heart. I hope you have a great, great day, and continue to believe and to know that as long as there's breath in our lungs, there's hope in our heart. As long as we're breathing, yes, we can. Where Your Life Speaks. Thank you for having me. I'm Nathan Harmon.